Let's fix some of the materials. So first, let's start with the sink. If you remember, it rendered as a block object. So that's because V-Ray Fast SSS2 material works only with closed objects. And since this is a one-sided, it's planar geometry. When you select one poly, you can see it from both sides. And the Fast SSS2 material can't calculate the subsurface scattering, and it renders it simply black. So we have two options here, either to remodel the sink as a closed object or create a slightly different material. Since I don't want to spend a lot of time remodeling it, I'm just going to change the material. Okay. I'm going to use a regular V-Ray material. Set the diffuse color to white. Give it some reflections. Enable Fresnel, set it at something like 3 maybe. Right, maybe 3.5. And blur the reflections slightly. Like this. And I'm also gonna give it a slight bump map. Just some noise in the bump slot. Alright, let's set it to 1, maybe 2. Okay, like that. So that's the same material. And now it should render just fine. Right, I also want to change my wood material. I think it's a bit too smooth. And I'm going to use a different texture. Okay, so here's the texture. Let's select it. And it's slightly more contrasty and different grain pattern. But we still need to create a reflection map from it. So let's launch the Photoshop. Open our texture. And create a desaturated version for the reflections. Right. I think I'm going to invert it so the dark parts reflect more than the light parts. And give it some more contrast. Okay, like that. Let's save it. Reflection. I'm gonna undo a couple of times, and I'm gonna use an high pass filter to make the image a bit more even. I'm gonna use the result as a bump map. Okay, let's give it some more contrast. And let's save it. Right. So let's set up the reflection map in the reflection slot. And the bump map in the bump slot. Okay. I'm going to try to increase the bump value to 2. I'm also going to copy the reflection map to the reflection glossiness slot. Right, I'm going to reduce it to maybe 10, 15, maybe even 20. Right, like that. And one more thing I want to do with this material is I want to give it some darkening around the corners and edges. So I'm going to use the V-Ray Dirt material for that. So go to your diffuse map and change it from bitmap to V-Ray Dirt. keep the old map as submap, and copy it from the radius slot to the unoccluded color slot, like this. And we're gonna make the dirt color something brown like this. Maybe like that. Okay, and I'm gonna make the effect a bit stronger by copying the diffuse map and pasting it in the same slot in the unoccluded color. Okay. So that should give us the basic wood material for this scene. I'm gonna try and render a little piece here and see how that looks. Okay, I think it's gonna look good. So let's leave the wood material as it is and move on. Okay, so first thing, it's a bit weird that we have these two different marble materials. I'm just gonna pick one of them and use it for all the surfaces. So I like this material a bit more. It's a bit more interesting. I'm gonna assign it to the work surfaces as well. Just drag and drop. And I'm gonna slightly edit it in Photoshop. I'm gonna create a new layer and fill it with a greener color. Maybe something like that. And change the blending modes. Okay. I think maybe like this. Make it slightly darker and a bit more saturated. Right, like that. Save it and go back to max. Okay, that's fine. And I also want to change my fabric material a bit. Make it more saturated and a bit greener. Kinda want to match it with the oven. Well, not perfectly matched, but get a bit closer. Right, let's save it. I'm gonna check our fabric material. Maybe let's increase the bump a bit to 18 or so. And adjust the fall of curve slightly. Okay, it's maybe a bit too saturated. Let's bring it down like this. All right. So next up are the walls. I think they are a bit too bright, so I'm going to change the diffuse color to something darker. Maybe like this. Okay. Maybe let's invert the bump by using a negative value here. And increase the reflection glossiness amount. Alright. Let's try it like that. Actually, I'm gonna try and make the walls a bit more interesting by adding some color variation. So select the reflect map, copy it, and create a mix in the diffuse slot. I'm gonna use the reflect map as the mix amount. And I'm gonna set up 2 different shades of gray as the mix colors. Alright, let's leave it like that. Okay, let's move on to the floor. I think it was not reflective enough. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna increase the reflection amount like this. Just to get it a bit more shinier. Actually, we can open this map here and use the levels to make the reflections brighter like this. This way the dark parts will not get reflective as well. Just gonna resave that. And change the reflect amount to maybe 80. Okay, that's gonna be too shiny. So we're gonna have to bring the reflect color down to black. Let's try a lower value. Right. Just something like that. Let's see how it looks. Okay, so next up I want to change the material for these lanterns. And I wanna make an old brass material. So instead of this perfectly shiny one, let's create a new V-Ray material. Let's name it to old brass. Alright, let's look at some reference images. Okay, let's look at this one. So the diffuse color can be something brown, like this. Okay. And we can also use V-Ray dirt map in the diffuse slot to give it some additional color transitions. All right. And we can set up a V-Ray dirt map in the reflect slot as well. Okay, let's set the radius to 5, maybe 8. And use an unoccluded color like something you would use for regular brass. And the occluded color can be a bit darker. Right, and I'm also going to use a black and white dirt map. So add some specks or dirty spots to this material. Okay, maybe let's look at some blaster images. I'm just trying to find something with a nice pattern. Okay, I like this one. Or maybe this one. Okay, let's try this. Open the large file in Photoshop. Desaturate it. Copy everything and crop to square. Right, paste, move down, maybe rotate. And using the erase tool, just blend the border. Okay, let's merge them down. And use the offset filter to bring the outer seams towards the center. What you want to do is you want to get rid of those seams so you get a nice stylable texture. Alright, looks nice. Let's bring up the contrast a bit. And let's save it as Dirt 1, for example. And we're going to use this map as a mix map. Right, so copy the unoccluded color and set up a mix map in the unoccluded color slot. Right, paste the color here. And for the mix amount, let's use the dirt map we just created. So here it is. Let's isolate one of the lanterns. And I think we need to add a UVW map modifier. Let's just set it to cylindrical. Enable cap and see how that looks. Okay, so let's pick the material and replace the brass with this one here. And let's go in the reflect slot and preview our mix texture. I think it's fine. Looks good. It's not perfect, but nobody's gonna notice that. Right, and set up the second mix color as the dark brown, maybe even more desaturated, like this. Let's increase the tiling a bit to 1.5 by 1.5. Okay, now copy the mix amount map, go up, and let's paste it in the reflection glossiness slot as well. And here I'm gonna rotate it 180 degrees. To make it different from the reflect map. Okay, looks interesting. And maybe let's reduce the reflection glossiness amount to maybe 60, like this. Alright, that looks fine. Now let's copy the map to the bump slot. Okay, for the bump I'm going to increase the tiling to maybe 4 by 4. And material looks pretty interesting. Maybe let's reduce the saturation for the reflect colors. That's too much, I think, like this. Alright. Okay, to make the effect in the reflection stronger, you can copy the dirt map and paste it into itself in the unoccluded color slot. This is gonna make the dirt effect a bit stronger. Okay, let's move closer to one of our lanterns. And render a little region here. Okay, I'm just gonna save the file first. It's actually a pretty good idea to save your file before making any test renders, because 3D Max and V-Ray has this glitch where if 3D Max starts auto-saving and you click render at the same time, it's just gonna crash and keep calculating light cache for all eternity, and you can't get your scene back, and you can't save it, and you can't do anything with it. So basically you're screwed. You gotta go back to your last autosave file. It's a good idea to save before rendering. So yeah, this makes the brass a bit more interesting than it was before. Nice antique effect. It's not too strong, but I think it's alright. Like these little pieces might be inside out, and so they render black. Let's check that. So let's isolate it again. Open the group. Open again. And select one of these little pieces here. Just select all of them. And you can check the normals by turning on the one light default lighting, and you can see, yeah, they are inverted, so that's why they render black. Your dirt works incorrectly with inverted objects, so just add a normal modifier like this. And that's fine. Alright, so that's it for the lanterns. Oh, there are some more inverted objects here. Let's fix those. Okay, that's good. If you're using the default 2-point lighting and creating some lathed objects, you can't really tell which way the normals are facing, so it's a good idea to turn on the one light and double check that just in case. Alright, and here's another problem. I think I'm actually gonna use this antique brass material for all the brass elements in this scene. looks a bit more interesting than just a regular shiny one. All right. Let's select all these brass pieces. These handles as well. Let's try selecting similar. Okay, let's hide that. That. Okay, and now we have only the pieces we want to assign the material to. So let's select all of them and assign the old brass material. And I'm also gonna add a UVW map to all of them at the same time. Just create a box map. Now let's set it to 50 by 50. Mapping so many objects at once sometimes be a bit slow and it might even crash. So be careful with that. All right. Okay, let's unhide all. You can preview the textures. Just to see if the map size is all right. I think it's gonna be fine. Yeah, just fine. So let's leave it in that. Okay, now let's move on to the white tiles right here behind Owen. I think it's this material, yeah. And then let's increase the bump to something like 120. And give it less noise and more tile. So let's change the mix amount to 80. Right, it's a bit too rough. So I'm gonna smooth the bump texture to maybe 2. I think 120 might be a bit too much, so let's try 80. Okay, like that. And let's make it quite a bit more reflective. Okay, good. And let's leave it. Alright, so what else? Here's another inverted object. Let's add the normal modifier. Good. And let's set up the wood for the chairs. Okay, so here's the chair material. Let's go up to the wood. I think it's pretty good, maybe a bit too reflective. So let's bring down reflections a bit. Maybe make the wood grain stronger. Okay, good. So that's fine. And maybe let's make a test render and see how it all looks together. Alright, I'm gonna change my DMC sampler to 4 just to get some smoother results. Let me change it back to 0.01. Okay, and let's make a render. Scratch that, let's double check the region and change it to U. Alright, and we can render the test. Alright, so it looks pretty good, but there are some things I want to change. So let's start with the wood material. I want to give it a coat of lacquer. So keep these nice diffused reflections and add another coat with some crisper ones. So I'm gonna increase the reflection glossiness for this material. Maybe like this. And change it to V-Ray blend material. Alright, keep the old material submaterial and copy it to the code slot as well. Paste the copy and get rid of the glossiness map and change the reflection glossiness to 0.98 or so. Okay, like that. So now it should have these sharper reflections as well as the wood underneath. Okay, I'm gonna reduce the bump for this layer. Let's try 0.5. Actually, let's change it from this bitmap to a noise map. Let's set the size to 100 and set it at 3 or maybe 5. Alright, like that. Okay, good. I'm gonna go back to my base material and I'm gonna blur the reflection glossiness map a bit. Okay, maybe let's bring it down slightly. All right, so let's try it like this. Again, I want to change the floor. I want to make it more reflective. I think it might be a bit too blurry. Let's try the glossiness at 0.88 and make the bump a bit smoother. Set the blur to 1. All right, And I also want to change my marble material. I want to give the reflections a bit sharper edge. So let's increase the reflection glossiness to 0.95. And check the noise map. Maybe let's increase it to 4 or so. Okay, looks good. And I also want to fix my fabric material. I want to add some bump in addition to this fabric bump here. I'm going to change it to mix and add some creases or distortions. I have my favorite texture here. I use it all the time for this sort of thing. And let's blend it at 50 for now. Okay, maybe even 80. Okay, bring up the strength of bump, and I think it looks a bit better. All right, so that's the fabric. I think that's about it for the materials. Let's re-render a little region. A little region over here. Okay, maybe the lacquer is a bit too strong. Let's check the marble. All right, marble looks good. Let's go back to the wood material. All right. So that's a crash. Hopefully it will save it. All right, here we are after the crash. Let's get back to our wood material. Okay. So let's increase this reflection glossiness for the base material. Maybe like this. Make it a bit more bumpy. And let's reduce the amount of the coat material. Oh, like that. Okay, good. render a region here and see how it looks. I think that's better. Alright, great. So that's the wood material. Let's check our fabric. Okay, let's cancel that. It's not too visible at the moment. Let's double check the material. Okay, so here's the material. And let's preview the creases texture on our object. Let's adjust the tiling, maybe like that. Let's make it stronger. Let's set it at 60 maybe. And re-render. Okay, and that's a bit better. You can see some creases here, so that's good. Okay, let's cancel that. And basically that's it for the materials in this color version. Now you just need to model and texture some accessories and filler stuff like pots, pans, maybe some food as well. I'm going to show you how to do that in the next video.